Arizona State's coming to town. It's time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Lars, as always, great to have you here. What is your first key to Washington's offense against Arizona State this coming week?
I think, it's kind of the overarch. It's more of an overarching key than it is a specific, matchup or player. Because when you look at the matchup itself, which is for a second go to it, Washington's offense clearly better than Arizona State's defense. Arizona State's offense not necessarily that great. I mean, they've actually been more effective running the ball, so that's where my concern is. But we'll talk about that in the next segment on the defensive side. That's really my only concern for this game is if they run for like 450, which just doesn't even seem possible. Like I'm just thinking that's the only way that right. But to be fair, that is where this would go sideways if it does go sideways. But what has historically Washington done to programs like Arizona State, to Cal, to Stanford, even to a degree? They played down to their opponents. We mentioned that Washington lost to Arizona State at home in 2021 with basically a lot of these same guys, right?
Yep.
But the reason for that was because you had an incompetent coaching staff and a incredibly talented group of players. So that's how they were able to win 4 games instead of 1 or none, right? Because there was so much talent on that team that's still here. So now this year, I think that's even going to be an extra motivator. Not a huge motivator, right? But like, these guys are like, hey, let's get the sour taste out of our mouth.
To be fair, though, there is a motivator in that sense, though, because Washington's last loss came against these Arizona State Sun Devils last year in Tempe. So there is still a little bit of that motivation factor there, because I'm sure that's on the players' minds. It's not something they're ever really going to just fully admit to, but it has to be there a little bit, right? Because especially when we look at how that season ended, how different it could have been if they win that game in Tempe.
Right. Well, and then to that point, Michael Penix has already had a game where he didn't throw a touchdown and they still won the game. And that was at Arizona. So I think you've kind of gotten that out of your system to where that's what happened. That's basically it wasn't Michael Penix's fault for why they lost that game, right? I'm not saying that, but obviously when you have your marquee quarterback not throw a touchdown, you're not necessarily in the best position. But one thing Washington has done this year is improve their run game. Obviously, you don't have Cam Davis, leading returning running back from last season, because he's been out for the season with an knee injury. But Dylan Johnson has had multiple, I believe he scored a rushing touchdown in the last 3 consecutive games, which is the first time he's ever done that in his career, I believe. If not, he might have done that one other time. But he's also not just getting the touchdowns, he's gaining more yards. And we saw against Oregon where he was basically the main back. He was the marquee back. I mean, you had 2 other running backs get 2 combined carries. So, and Sam Adams made an appearance, but didn't get a touch. So it's one of those where, okay, if for some reason Arizona State is able to lock down Michael Penix for a second consecutive year, which hats off to them if they can do that. I don't believe they will, but if they can, Washington is more capable of running the ball this season. And I asked Scott Huff about their run blocking, and he's like, yeah, it's certainly improved. Is it anywhere where we want to be? No. But again, you still have 6 games left in the season, so you don't really want to you want to hit your stride probably after you're going into USC, right? You got a couple more warm-up games before that to get to that point. And I think this is another one of those games to where you can say, hey, if we can't pass the ball for whatever reason, we need to establish the run game. And we saw it against Oregon where Dylan Johnson was ripping off 8-9 yard carries at ease almost, right? And, aside from the couple on the goal line where, the field gets really, really scrunched and really condensed, when he's in the open field, he's able to get there. And I think he's still able to be as effective in the red zone. It's just there were certain other things that broke down on those plays that didn't allow them to get into the end zone. But the overarching one is don't play down to your opponent. Just just get a comfortable lead, like I said, 28-10 at halftime, and allow the running game to take over. Because, I mean, really, this should be a game. I mean, the point spread, I believe, came down a little bit. I believe it is 26.5 now. It could be 20 because it's opened at 27.5.
Yeah.
So not a huge difference, but enough of a difference to say, okay, you're basically a 4-touchdown favorite, right? So you should be able to win this game rather handily. Washington, I believe, has either pushed or covered in every game. Obviously, they pushed against Oregon. Depending on which line you took, they might have covered because of
there were some that were 2.5. Yeah.
Right. So depending on, but for the most part, Washington egregiously does not play down to their opponents and kind of half that spread in half, right? Because this should not be a 2-possession, 3-possession game. This should be basically like what Cal was, right? Where you're talking 45-10 at a half, and you're comfortable.
And you kind of go from there.
Second. Right. I mean, we talk about the yardage in the second half that doesn't count. But, one thing that we'll talk about in the next segment is going to be the key for this game.
Right. So, and the one thing that you really want to highlight when it comes to Arizona State's defense is Prince Dorba, where he's been excellent this year. He's, I believe, third in the Pac-12. Yeah. Third in the Pac-12 in total sacks with 6. So he's technically tied for second. But he's the one guy that you really want to watch out for on this defense. And the nice thing about Washington's offensive line is that they're so strong and so talented that they're not going to just let one guy beat them. Where I think Prince Dorba is really, really talented, but he's not necessarily in the same vein of a Leiatu Latu or even like a Brandon Dorless or just some of the guys that we saw on the Oregon defensive line last weekend, where he's done a really good job of wrecking games, but it just hasn't amounted to very much. And Washington's offensive line is probably the toughest test he'll have to face this season. So that's one thing that you really want to be made aware of. And the other thing that we just do have to kind of touch on is especially when we talk about the offense, really, is the injury questions, right? Where will Jeremy Bernard be able to suit up and go? Will Jalen McMillan be able to suit up and go? And it's something you and I were talking about before the show is, could this be a big Giles Jackson game? We kind of don't really know because we talked about it with Ryan Grubb at his press conference on Monday. And then a little bit today, Jamarcus Shepard kind of talked about how impressed he's been with Giles Jackson this season and how hard he's worked to get back to this point. So, because there were a lot of questions before the year, will they redshirt him this season? So, one of the big questions that goes into that is who's going to play, right? Can Jalen McMillan and Jeremy Bernard go? Can even one of them go? Because if one of them are able to go, that still kind of takes some pressure off of, okay, well, maybe we don't need to use Giles now. But if both of them can't, then that kind of puts a little bit more strain and kind of forces him into action.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, our guy, everyone's guy, Denzel Boston. Like this is a game to where, and we talked, you touched on it a little bit, right? Where maybe if you get Jalen back or you get Jeremy back, I mean, I think of the two, you probably want Jeremy back because here's the thing. If you play Giles a certain number of games, he can't redshirt, right? And if you lose, we talked about this before the show, where if you start to project, okay, if he plays the entire rest of the season, he cannot redshirt without question. That's a given, right? Because he's going to be up to 8 games at that point, 8 or 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range.
7, 8, something like that, yeah.
Depending on how far you get in the playoffs and things like that. But one guy that hasn't had a ton of game time this season is Denzel Boston. So this is a perfect game to where if you're a 4-touchdown favorite, you don't need Jalen McMillan. You don't necessarily even need Jeremy Bernard or Giles Jackson. You should be able to beat this team handily with Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Denzel Boston because you have capable tight ends, Jack Westover, Devin Cole. I mean, Josh Cuevas could have another big play again. There's enough on this offense to where this is a game, especially because we're talking about you're going to play Stanford next week and then USC the week after that. That's correct, I believe. Right. And so that's the one where you really want those guys back. You want to have your full contingent back against USC because you can get away with it against Stanford. You can get away with it against Oregon State or Arizona State. Sorry, not Oregon State, because not this year. But with respect, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how they manage guys, right? Because the second you play a game, that counts as a game. You can play 2 snaps, that counts as a game. So, you want to be able to say, okay, who do we want to pick here, right? Do we want, because you have both short and long term, and you also want guys to be able to achieve the most that they can and go on to the NFL. So Jalen would probably be one of those guys where you would want him to play, and maybe Denzel takes the spot of Giles and Jeremy. So with that being said, I think that it's more or less going to be, how do you Tetris it? Who plays when? Because this staff is not going to waste put Giles Jackson out for 1 or 2 series and then not play in the rest of the game just because of a matchup, right? It's like, if Giles is out there, he is playing the full game. If Jeremy is out there, well, I guess he doesn't have to play the full game, but he's certainly going to be a factor for all 4 quarters. I think that, and you don't want to have another repeat of McMillan, to where if he goes out and tries again against Arizona State and suffers an even worse setback, it's like, okay, why are we doing this? Why not just give him? I mean, they intentionally went long to give him that extra week going into Oregon, and then it just went sideways after 8 snaps.
Right, which is just really, really a bummer to see when it comes to Jalen McMillan, but it does kind of feel like everything's going to be all right for him in the long run, and we'll kind of see how the rest of the week plays out, and if he does end up putting the pads on playing Saturday. And before we get to our defensive picks, we've got to take a second here and talk about our good friends over at PrizePicks. And I love talking about PrizePicks because I just love fantasy sports, and PrizePicks is the most fun I've ever had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selections of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select players up to 25% to provide even more value. PrizePicks now also offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And do you want to get on the action? It's super easy. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks are daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Lars, you hinted at it a little bit, but now it's time to switch from the offense over to the defensive side. And the first thing here that I really wanted to kick off with is while we were prepping for the show, you gave a great stat in scoring defense. And it's a very similar stat to last season. And I want to give you the floor here and just kind of talk about UW's scoring defense and this kind of making plays when they need to, and just kind of good but not great defense that we've seen so far from the Huskies this season.
Yeah, so the interesting thing when you look at the final year of the Pac-12, it's really divided in half on defense, right? There's 6 teams that give up 21 or less points, right? Because Washington, there's 3 schools that are at 20, right? 20.6, 20.8, and 20.3. And then you got a bunch of teams just way on the opposite side of that. It's like, so they're either really good or really bad. And so Washington is closer to the really good than the really bad. And especially as you mentioned, at times, they only gave up 1 sack to Oregon. 1 sack.
Yep.
So and I told Scott Huff this after the game, or after practice today, we're like 1 sack against Oregon in 2 games. That's pretty significant. But for the defensive side, when they're able to get enough pressure and disrupt Bo Nix, I mean, they only got 1 sack on Bo, but when you look at multiple key plays of that, the final 4th down play, even the 4th down that Dom Hampton tipped in the end zone, things like that, there was pressure there and forcing Bo to make a decision. And that, if you're not getting home, that is what you have to do. And I think against an offense like Arizona State, this should be a game where, I believe it was Stanford a couple of years ago, where they had like 7 or 8 sacks.
That was Stanford last year, yeah, with the slow mesh. But I don't think that's going to happen again. I do have one of my bold predictions is a sack stat, but I don't think we're going to see 8 sacks against Stanford again, because this is a different staff, and their whole big thing was that slow mesh concept. And because with and the whole thing of that is it's an RPO sometimes, but just a whole lot slower to develop, where the quarterback has more time to read the defense, kind of see what's going on. And that's kind of what allowed Braylon Trice and Zion Tupuola-Fetui to just do so well against this offense last year, was because the quarterbacks just kind of sat in the pocket and sat. And there were times where he was holding the handoff for a couple of seconds before deciding to pull. And by that point, Braylon Trice and Zion Tupuola-Fetui, who are as good as they are, were already in the backfield.
But that was against Stanford, right? And so this against Arizona State, where they're better running the ball than they are passing the ball, I think in order to create those openings in the passing lane, they're going to have more of that read option that Kenny Dillingham has brought from Oregon to where it's like, hey, give your running back and your quarterback a chance. Because if UW is selling out to stop the run, those are those one-on-one opportunities you can try and hit, maybe not against Jabbar, but you can find those openings in the defense. And so I think that actually, I'm not saying they're going to get 8 sacks. I'm not, sure. I'll get to my bold predictions later. They're not going to be that bold. But I do think this is a game to where Zion and Braylon should have more of an impact in a statistical factor. Not because, I mean, we saw it again. I mean, Braylon destroyed Josh Connolly. Like, my word, he became Josh Connolly's father in that game. Like, that was incredible. I mean, and Zion, and to Zion's credit, he was beating, I don't know how to pronounce the Oregon right tackle's name, but he's a transfer.
Oh, Cornelius. Yeah.
Right. He was getting off at like about a second to almost a second and a half before every snap, not illegally, but just he had that good of a jump. And so I think against an even weaker offensive line, those guys should be able to get home more and, you know, just have a general level of success better from a statistical perspective, because obviously Arizona State is not as good as Bo Nix passing the ball. Like, Bo is good. Bo is very good. You know what? I need to take this opportunity really quick. When I said he was a poor man's Johnny Manziel, it was more or less in the, like, Johnny Manziel was the cash cow, the name, the marquee name, and not that Bo isn't, but having come from Auburn, he was kind of that like second, third rung guy. So, but Bo has shown, hey, look, he's very good, and especially against the right scheme and things like that. Maybe
I do have a question. Sorry, did you get some pushback on that from anybody? Because I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon fans were all up in your mentions about that.
Surprisingly, no, because I think, I mean, maybe I might have muted all of them that were saying those things. Well, I guess could be not, but I didn't want to clarify, having seen Bo Nix again this year and you know, everything that he was able to do in the second half, certainly have to give Bo his flowers. But Arizona State does not have that quarterback. Even in the next couple, I mean, the only other quarterback that is like that is Caleb Williams, and you'll see him in 3 weeks. So this is basically your primer to say, get everything sorted out on defense. Really, get the tackling sorted out. This is a game. This is a game, and also against Stanford, you know, even more so. But I think this game, especially because you're at home, get the tackling figured out, please. I mean, at time again, to your point and to our point, both, as we've said multiple times throughout this week, and even after the game, they made the plays when they needed to. But how about you don't put yourself in that situation? Exactly. Because again, if you stop Jordan James on 2 of those tackles, maybe Oregon actually doesn't get in the end zone. Maybe you force another 4th down stop.
Right. Or they kick a field goal or something like that.
Something.
Which just seems just out of this world when we look at Dan Lanning's decisions. And we don't need to go into the fact that I told you both times that they should have kicked a field goal in the red zone. If they do that twice, they win the game. But we don't need to go down that road because that didn't happen. But
I also did tell you I will also tell you, because I tweeted in the mid-third quarter that they were locked in on going for 4th down. There was no chance that Dan wasn't going to go for 4th at that 100%. Point. After the first half, the late first half decision, Oregon was pinned into go, whether or not they liked it or whether or not they were going to or not, they had to go on 4th down every single time.
Yep. Well, last thing I really wanted to talk about is it's similar to the tackling, where I want to see more from the linebackers, where Edefoni Lefaucheux was awesome. He played a fantastic game on Saturday, but I kind of just want to see what the rest of the room has to offer. And this is a great test for that, right? Because you talked about how Arizona State is going to be much more of a threat running the ball compared to throwing it. So it's just kind of all right, show me what you got. Are they going to line up in heavy personnel? And, you know, maybe we see a 3rd linebacker on the field, whether it's Carson Bruner or Raylan Goforth, whoever it might be. But it's just, okay, to exactly what you said, the tackling needs to be figured out. William Inge called it good, not great earlier in the week. And even that might be a little bit of an overstatement in my opinion, but it was good enough, right? It was good enough to get the job done. And now going forward, especially if that is a point of emphasis, you need to make sure that it's gotten right. And this is the time to get it right. You're at home, you're under the lights, you're wearing these sick new helmets that, Lars, you and I have seen in person, and we were just kind of, oh yeah, these are nice. And anybody who has any doubts about the helmets, go to the game on Saturday, look at them under the lights. I was talking with Jabbar Muhammad on Tuesday, and he was just kind of like showing it off for me. And I was like, wow, like these look really nice. And he just said, I can't wait to see these under the lights. And I just was like, yeah, man, I agree. So that's another thing where you got these cool new uniforms, all that's going on too. But that's what these uniforms are supposed to be for. and I am going to take a shot at Oregon here. Cool uniforms are supposed to be meant for winners. And this is the time to bring up the 0 national championships thing. But it's that's really what it's supposed to be for, right? So you're wearing the new uniforms, act like it, tackle, do that. Don't let guys slip out of every single tackle that you're trying to make. I really think that's just the long and the short of it is work on the tackling, just force runs back to the inside, and let your linebackers do their job.
Yeah, and I think, well, and to our friend of the show, Mike Farrell, works for the Seattle Times, does a great job covering this. Does a great job covering this team. He's going to have, I don't know if it's a piece, but he's working on something. We're looking at when Washington does not have the traditional gold helmets. My word, please do not become part of that statistic because it's only been one time where it was a positive result. And when I say positive, I mean clear and above positive result, right? There's multiple. They won a majority of those games, but man, they had no business being ready. Right. So I think and I think that's what Kalen DeBoer does well. He rewards his players because again, you could have done this against Oregon and tried to match flash with flash, and I think that would have been unlike Kalen, right? So after you get the win against Oregon, you prove that you guys can handle this jersey. Now do it, have some fun, and then we'll go back to traditional next week.
No, absolutely. And Lars, now before we move into our bold predictions, we're going to take a minute here because it's time to talk about our friends over at Jace Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in this world today. There are hurricanes and tornadoes in Florida. There are earthquakes. Being from California, I know we're just way overdue for a big earthquake. And one of the big issues with that is those can lead to supply chain shortages for medication or the inability to get medications in a timely manner. What's a great solution? The Jace case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jace Medical now offers customizability for your Jace case with dozens of add-on medications. Choose the medications that fit you and your family's unique need. Jace is continually working to expand their medication offerings. And one of the recent things that they've added to the Jace case is ivermectin. And another thing that you can do is you can buy a gift card. You can buy a gift card for your family or your loved ones so that they can get a Jace case of their own. And you can make sure that everybody in your life is prepared. So how do you do it? You can go to jacemedical.com and enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. I know I've said this before, but this is always my favorite show of the week because when we prep for these shows, we write down some truly insane things sometimes, just like throwing them out of left field. And as we were talking before the show, I think only half of one of our predictions came through in the last one outside of my correct spread prediction on our crossover show with our buddy Spencer. Is that I said that Michael Penix is going to throw for 400 yards, which didn't happen. But he did throw for 4 touchdowns. So bang, I'm going to take that one and chalk it up as a W. So with that being said, Lars, what is your first bold prediction for this game against Arizona State?
Dylan Johnson runs for another 100-yard game and has at least 1 rushing touchdown because he's had 3 in 3 consecutive games. He had multiple touchdowns, I believe, against Arizona.
Okay. Yep.
I believe that's correct. He only had 1 against Oregon. Right. So yes. I think Dylan is kind of hitting his stride. He's getting physical. And I think, especially in the second half of the game when Washington and Penix had probably already thrown for 300 or 400 yards, you want to get Dylan the ball more, just get him more comfortable working and kind of just grinding and icing the game away.
Right. So that's great because I always have to go with the skill position one. And I do have 2. And one of them is definitely off the wall. And it's somebody we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. But my first one is pretty on brand for the show and just the Husky offense as a whole. Odunze, over 150 yards and 2+ touchdowns. I'm going to lock that one in. Arizona State's defense, it's all right. It's not great. So that one I can absolutely see hitting. So I wanted, because some of the ones that I do are just kind of like, I'm going to throw this out there and let's see if this happens. This one, it's a big gaudy number, but I think that there's a really good chance that he can hit this one. So I'm going to just stamp that one as my first one.
That's fair. That's fair. I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that. So I'm going to keep my tradition. Okay. I'm going to keep my tradition of anytime touchdown for skill players. Part of me wants to say a traditional, Jeremy, go back to the well a few times. But I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it interesting. I think I might take the one you have, Denzel Boston anytime.
Nope, that wasn't mine.
I
do have a Denzel one.
Okay, so I think I'm going to say Denzel Boston anytime touchdown, whether it's receiving, rushing, whatever you want to call it. I think this might be the first kind of game for him to establish himself this season and really, whether or not Giles plays, whether or not Jalen plays, I think no matter what, this is the perfect game for him to get more reps.
I agree. And so that actually leads perfectly into my next one, which is I think that Denzel Boston is going to have over 5 or more. I'll say 5 or more receptions for 50 yards. And a lot of it might depend on the game flow, but I think that there's a really good chance that, because we did see him on the field for a couple snaps against Oregon. So I think that this is the time where, okay, yeah, Denzel, like they're really, really high on him. Jamarcus Shepard had a lot of really good things to say about him today. And he kind of did say Denzel is on the plan that we want him to be on. He's on the right track. He's getting there. And it's something you and I have talked about where we saw him make so many plays throughout fall camp. It's wow, like it's going to be really hard to keep this guy off the field. But he happens to be a member of the best receiving corps in the nation. So that's something that for a redshirt freshman who we're really excited about, and next year especially think that he's going to do really, really big things. This might be his first real opportunity to get some run in.
Exactly. So I think I remember actually to go back to the spring game where he caught the accidental fly sweep that was meant to be actually a run play, but he caught it and ran it. I think that there's some way, shape, or form he's going to get in the end zone. So I like both those a lot, even though it doesn't sound like 5 for 50 is a bold prediction. It's like, well, look at what he's done this season. That is a bold prediction, right? That to your point. Right. Had he done that last year, not so bold. Not so bold last year, but this year is certainly bold. So I think I'm going to go to the defensive side. I'm going to go, I'll do some interceptions here. I'm going to say, because Washington didn't have one against Bo Nix, if Washington is able to stop Arizona State's run game or at least slow them down and force somebody into making a bad decision passing the ball, I'm going to say Washington has 2 or more interceptions. Okay. Give me Elijah Jackson for one of them, and give me, I don't want to say Jabbar, but I do want to say Jabbar.
I think you go Jabbar.
I'm going to go Jabbar. I think 2 cornerbacks, two interceptions, 2 or more interceptions. I think, this is time for Washington to, because again, they lost the turnover battle and still won the game, right? So I think this is one where you could say, hey, against an inferior team, you should, look at Cal. How many turnovers did Cal throw? Like, this is kind of going to be in that same sort of mold where you should get multiple turnovers, multiple sacks, that sort of thing. So give me 2 or more interceptions, 1 for EJ, 1 for Jabbar. So
I'm going to go 2 back-to-back here because I have one more offensive one, and then I'll get into my defense. So offensive one, my anytime touchdown. You're going to like this one. Tybo Rogers. I say he gets his first career touchdown in this game. I don't know what it is, but the fact that he was out there on 4th and goal, you can debate whether it should have been him or it should have been Dylan Johnson. No slight to Tybo, but you can debate that as much as you want. The fact of the matter is he was out there on 4th and goal. So Ryan Grubb has to trust him a little bit to put him out there in that scenario. I think that, I don't know if it's, because this game gets out of hand, he just gets a lot of run at the end of the game. He finds a way to get in the end zone that way. Whatever it is, I have a feeling that Tybo Rogers' first career college touchdown will come this Saturday against Arizona State. And then flipping over to the defense, I don't have that many defensive ones today, but my first one is 4+ sacks in this game for the Huskies. They've not really gotten after the quarterback very well. That would almost be that would almost double what they've done so far this season. They have 7 sacks through 6 games. So that I think that this is incredibly bold despite how talented these edge rushers are. But I think that it's possible. Arizona State's offensive line has been okay, but Braylon Trice, Zion Tupuola-Fatui, just everybody that the Huskies have on the edge. I think that we might be able to see a little bit of Lance Holtzclaw in this game too. Maybe he, maybe he gets in there and gets a sack against one of his hometown teams. So that's possible too. I'm going to go with 4+ sacks for the Huskies in this game.
I could definitely see the one for Lance, especially being an Arizona kid, and that just kind of seems right. I mean, Tybo should have gotten. That'd be a perfect way for Tybo to start that career if he got in against Oregon. But I also don't know why I understand why he was in, but in my head, just give the ball to Dylan. Please do not Marshawn Lynch that guy again, Ryan Grubb. But with that being said, because I told you that before the show, so I'm going to be consistent here. You want one more from me and then my prediction, and then or do you want?
Let's go. I've got one more defensive one after that. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so give me. I'm going to go back to the offensive side.
Okay.
I'm gonna say, did you have one on Penix yet or no?
No.
Okay, so
Wow, I feel like that's a first for me.
So I will take that one since I gave you that one last week. I will say
Thank you.
Penix gets back above 400, throws for 475 and 5 touchdowns.
I like it. Just kind of putting that extra stamp on the I am the Heisman favorite. I like that a lot.
Okay, and no interceptions. No interceptions. Shout out, Mike.
Even better. So I know I've said something along these lines before. This one is kind of a double down on his stats from last week, and I feel like I've predicted this at some point in the past. Edwin Ulofosio is going to be the leading tackler in this game, and he is once again going to have double-digit tackles. I feel like in this age of like just with the way sometimes offenses will run away from a certain person, that it's a little bit bolder than you might think. But yeah, I think 10 plus tackles for Eddie is doable, but also bold in a sense.
No, I completely agree. I was also curious if you would throw in the caveat he also gets another sack, because I think if they're going to get multiple sacks in this game, that would be one where Eddie would also probably be a guy delivering that.
I was thinking about it, but in our hypothetical point system, I want to make sure I get the full point for it. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna leave it there.
Fair. I respect
and
that.
Now,
I respect that.
If I had like a drum roll sound effect, I would play it, or I would just start banging the table, but that would just sound terrible. But it is time for everyone's favorite segment, Lars' score prediction. Lars, what is your obviously correct final score going to be for this game this weekend?
So Washington will cover, even though it's 28.5 or 27.5. The over-under is at 60 and a half. They should get into the 50s, right? Part of me wants to say 48, part of me wants to say 52. I'm going to caveat if they get back they get to the 50s, right? Because you're at home, so this should be doable here. 52-20.
Okay.
Because I think Arizona State's going to get their points. Washington is not world beaters on defense, but this is kind of the game where, all right, let's put a complete game together.
Right.
Most of the offense should be healthy. The defense is healthy. I mean, am I missing anybody on defense that could be? I mean,
much healthier.
Right. I mean, maybe Truly is back to full strength.
Right. Like there's no Devon Banks, obviously, but it's discounting the season ending.
Guys, right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think this is kind of the game, and also get rid of the taste of 2021 last year. I mean, you got multiple motivating factors here. Hang 50. You don't need to hang 70. This doesn't have to be a Miami Dolphins, Denver Broncos situation. But it should be like that in the yardage category.
Right. I can definitely see that. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the everydayers out there who have tuned in. We really appreciate all your constant support. It's just been awesome, especially with the way this team has been playing. There's been so much to talk about, and we love doing the show for you every day, but we get tired. So seeing all your support out there does really mean a lot to us. And if you're not an everydayer yet, we'd love for you to become one. Some great ways to do that. Just subscribe wherever you're listening to this right now, whether that be YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. It's free. Smash subscribe, follow, download, whatever it is. We'd love it if you did all that. Leave a like on this video, leave a 5-star review, all of that, the whole 9 yards. Leave us a comment. We'll try to respond to them as many of those as we possibly can. And we will talk to you on